Howdy, folks. Welcome to Camera Shake, where we bring you the insider scoop on all things photography and videography. Giving you a unique opportunity to stay ahead of the curve. We spent literally hundreds of hours interviewing some of the most renowned photographers of our time, giving you access to knowledge and expertise that's not available anywhere else. As always, I'm your host, Kirsten Nuts, and in today's episode, I've got some incredibly exciting and awesome news for you. So buckle up, grab a cold one, and let's shake it up with today's guest right after this. Welcome to Camera Shake Podcast, episode 147. But hang on, wait a minute. Before we get into today's episode, I have one small favor to ask of you. If you enjoy this podcast, please join the Camera Shake community over on camerashakepodcast.com so that you're the first ones to know when we've got exciting news for you. You'll find the link in the description, or if you're watching on YouTube, and I don't forget to put it in, it'll be right down here somewhere on the screen. But without further ado, let's give it up for today's special guest, Dave Williams, live in the studio.
When the crowd goes wild.
Way.
Where is the crowd?
Let's I'll play it.
Damn it.
We're going to talk about one of the most incredible opportunities for photographers this year.
Yeah.
Ooh, should we tell?
It's a pretty incredible opportunity for photographers this year.
Oh, absolutely, 100%.
We mentioned it when I was guest 4 or 5 episodes back.
Yes,
we mentioned it, touched on it, but didn't really go into a great deal of detail. But together, Kirsten and I are going to be running the Lofoten Islands Viking Photography Workshop. It's an exclusive series of 6 photography workshops in the Lofoten Islands, 200 miles north of the Arctic Circle in Northern Norway, this September, October, and January.
That's the news,
That's the news. That's it. Okay, see you later.
That's it. When you think of the Lofoten Islands, what comes to mind are these incredible images of red fishing huts and mountains in the background and everything else. And of course, we're going to be shooting that, no doubt. The landscape there is one of the most incredible landscapes in Europe and actually in the world. It's just absolutely mind-boggling. But that's not all.
Oh,
that's not all, because not only are we.
Did you say Northern Lights?
I haven't mentioned Northern Lights yet.
So, and Northern Lights, but that's not all.
Exactly.
Go on.
Yeah. So Northern Lights, obviously, if you're like me and you haven't actually ever seen Northern Lights with your own eyes, then this is going to be an amazing opportunity to not only obviously witness them, but also learn how to photograph them, because that in itself is a whole different ballgame. But that's not all, because, well, there's more.
Wait, there's more?
There's more.
Wow.
There's more. So it's not only landscapes, the most incredible landscapes in the world.
The Arctic.
The Arctic, of course. The
Northern Lights.
The Northern Lights. Who lives in the...
Santa.
Yeah.
Oh, no. Reindeer.
Reindeer.
There's going to be reindeer. So we've got exclusive access to a paddock of reindeer owned by a semi-reindeer herder.
Yeah.
On the island of Vesterålen, which is just round the corner from Lofoten. And we're going to go and spend some time inside the reindeer paddock. We're going to feed the reindeer, make friends with them, and then we're going to sneak up on them and take their pictures when we've become friends.
I'm glad you didn't say...
Gained their trust.
I'm glad you didn't say we're going to shoot them.
We're going to take their photograph.
Right.
Or make their photograph, depending on how you look at it.
Yeah.
That's a thing. But that's not all.
That's not all. No.
It just keeps going.
That's not all, because apart from running masterclasses in landscape photography and northern light photography, we're also going to be running a portrait photography masterclass with real life Vikings.
Whoa. Real life Vikings. Actual, genuine Vikings straight out of Valhalla. These guys are... So there's 3 of them. So there's going to be... one of them is going to be in the September workshops, a different one's going to be in the October workshops, and a different one is going to be in the January workshops. And these guys are professional Viking models. So they do all the TV stuff, like the Game of Thronesy type, Norsemen type, all that stuff. They do that stuff. They're in the movies. Bodybuilders, they are ripped, they are shredded, as they say.
But they look absolutely incredible. I mean, not only that, but also, it's the costumes, it's the weaponry, there's the armor, the shields, the whole shebang.
Scars, the makeup, everything. They do it all, and it's on the money.
If you've seen the series Vikings on Amazon Prime, or Vikings Valhalla, which I believe is in Paramount in the UK, then you know exactly what we're talking about, because that is exactly what you get.
We're not talking LARPing, live action role play. We're not talking the kind of Vikings that roll around and then they go to the tent and then they make tea, and then we're not talking that. We're talking like movie style, cosplay style, all the armor, all the stuff. It's gonna be so cool. But we're taking them out into the landscapes in Lofoten. We're gonna shoot them, but so we're gonna have the landscape masterclass, we're gonna have the portrait masterclass, we're gonna have ambient light and flash, we're gonna have the Northern Lights, we're gonna have the Reindeer. You said about the red cabins. We're staying at a place called Svinøya Rorbuer, which is 195-year-old traditional fishing village with all the red cabins, wooden cabins by the sea, but they've been restored and brought up to date. So it's like modern luxury with attached to it Borsen Spisery, which is one of the finest restaurants in Northern Norway. Incredible food, and we're going to be eating there together as a team on the first night. We're going to have a Viking feast in there on the last night and trash the place. It's going to be incredible. And I feel like we should say, but that's not all, because I feel like there's more.
It's such an incredibly jam-packed week of photography bonanza. It's just incredible. Apart from the fact that we're in this incredible landscape and this amazing part of the world, we'll have the opportunity to experience that with some of the experts, especially when it comes to the Aurora Borealis or the Northern Light. There's no better place to be than Lofoten. We'll talk about why that is in just a second.
I was just going to say, I could tell you why.
But not only you're going to have a chance to be in this amazing location, but you're going to be able to be there with one of the leading experts on Northern Lights photography, i.e. Dave Williams right here, the man who literally wrote the book on it.
The bestseller.
The best-selling book on it.
So my book, The Complete Aurora Guide for Travelers and Photographers, excuse me, I'm too excited, is a bestseller. You can get it on Amazon. And it explains the Aurora Mechanics, how to photograph the Northern Lights. It gives you a load of folklore and stories from days gone by, including Viking stories. But we're going to go into that in detail on the workshop as well, if you want to hear it straight out of my mouth in story form. And we'll obviously demonstrate everything.
In the actual place. That's
that
the thing.
Location. Yeah. But do you want to know why the Northern Lights are so good in Lofoten?
I think I know why, but go ahead.
Oh, no, go on.
I think it's got something to do with the composition of the rock.
Yes.
Is that what it is?
That's something.
In that particular area?
Yeah.
It has like a high content of iron, maybe?
No.
Right.
You were going in the right direction, though, so that's fine. So the Northern Lights are caused by plasma, helium plasma, flying through space from the sun. Right. Coronal mass ejections, solar flares. They fly through space and they come into our interplanetary magnetic field. They get attracted to the poles. They hit gases in our ionosphere. And that collision of the gases that this plasma hits, there has to be an exchange of energy, and that exchange is released in the form of light. So therefore, we see light in the sky when these particles collide.
Bang.
The location at which the lights come in, or the plasma comes in to our ionosphere, is dictated by our Earth magnetic field and kind of the polarity of the plasma itself. But the good thing about Lofoten, and the reason why Lofoten is one of the best places, if not the best place in the world to see the Northern Lights, is the mountains are made of granite. Oh, right. So you have these enormous chunks of granite, and granite is conductive. It helps with the magnetic field.
Right.
And so you get these sharp, incredibly strong rays of light above you with the aurora because of that. So if you go to other places, if you go to Canada or Iceland, it's a bit wishy-washy. Mm-hmm. It's still there. It's still good. But in Lofoten, it's just better. It's more focused, more concentrated because of the composition of the terrain. It's really geeky.
You know what really geeky. What amazes me the most, and I'm a big fan of Vikings and Viking lore and all that kind of stuff. And I just Skull. I just I just think if you lived there in the 800s, back in medieval times, and
King Oystein lived there in 893. So you were pretty good with your timing.
Yeah,
I like it.
So the Viking raids in Britain, the end of the 9th century, basically. We're talking Ragnar what's his name? Lothbrok, that's it, and his various sons. Mm-hmm. But I'm just thinking, like, you imagine at that time, being a Viking, living in that place, and Lofoten is literally the place where seafaring Vikings were, resident, so to say. But just imagine, living there and witnessing the Northern Lights spectacle, night on night. I mean, what
was going through their minds?
What was going through their minds? Yeah. Incredible.
It's crazy when you think about it. But that's the reason. So if you are either a fan of Vikings or if you've watched any of the Marvel stuff with Thor and all those characters, you'll be aware of some of the stories. You might be aware of some of the stories anyway of the Valkyries.
Mm-hmm.
They come and take the warriors from battle and take them to Valhalla. Valhalla, the great hall in the sky, heaven, basically. It's where warriors go when they die, when they successfully died in battle.
And drink and feast with the gods.
Exactly.
That's the idea.
With Odin and all the other guys. And so...
Which is actually what we're going to be doing on the last day.
Exactly.
So we're
going to have a big Viking feast.
That's it.
In the great hall at Svinøya. So they go over, the Valkyries take them to Valhalla over the Rainbow Bridge, over Bifrost.
Right.
And that's the Northern Lights. That's what the Northern Lights are.
Oh, right.
There's an arc in the sky of light, like a rainbow.
Yes.
And so Bifrost,
so
the Rainbow Bridge, from mythology.
Right, the one that we know from Marvel movies.
That is the Northern Lights.
Right, I see. Okay.
In Viking stories, that is what the Northern Lights are. But it's amazing because every culture that witnessed the Northern Lights has stories to explain it, because obviously the science wasn't there then, and so they didn't know what it was, they didn't know what was going on. And so another one relating to the sea comes from just down the road from Lofoten in Sweden, where they were big into fishing. And so the big fishing stock that you want to catch in those Arctic waters are scray or cod. And the cod follow the herring because the cod eat the herring. So if you can find the herring, you can find the cod and you can feast. So what they believed in Sweden hundreds of years ago is that the Northern Lights were, I can't remember the Swedish word for it, but it translates to herring flash.
Okay.
And so the green light in the sky was the reflection of masses of herring in the water underneath. So when they saw the herring flash, the Northern Lights, they sailed that way because then they thought they're going to get all the cod. The herring are there, the herring flash. So the cod must be there too.
Was that particularly successful, do you think? I mean,
I don't know. Take it as you wish.
Yeah.
But that's the Swedish story, and there are so many stories of the Northern Lights throughout the globe. Their oldest recorded drawing of the Northern Lights, this is going to blow your mind, is in a cave in the south of France.
In the south of France?
On the edge of the Pyrenees.
Wow, okay.
So the sun goes through a solar cycle. And we've been observing the solar cycles since the 1700s. And it's basically they didn't know it was connected to the Northern Lights, but they were observing the solar cycles, all the ancient astronomers, and noticed the sun had more activity and then less activity, and there was a cycle. And this cycle goes over approximately 11 years. And right now, we're approaching solar maximum, the peak of this current solar cycle and the beginning of the next solar cycle. So we're now going into solar cycle 25 since they started measuring and observing. And that means the Northern Lights this winter coming, perfectly timed for this workshop, are going to be the strongest they've been for 11 years and for the next 11 years to come.
Right. So it's an 11-year cycle.
It's an 11-year cycle.
Right. So now's the time.
Now is the time.
Wow. Okay.
I've just spent 80 days there this winter, and I've seen... I think probably four of my top 5 Northern Lights displays were knocked out for displays I saw this past 80 days in the Arctic.
Wow.
So like for the past 7 or 8 years worth of Northern Lights, just this one winter season we've just had 4 just got knocked off because these lights now are so strong because we're approaching solar maximum. We're getting so many more solar flares, so many more substorms, geomagnetic storms. For example, when I left and I got a ferry from Norway to Denmark, so I'm approximately the same latitude as Scotland, I had the Northern Lights overhead on the ferry.
Wow. Okay.
And I was shooting it on my iPhone.
Yeah.
Because that's where we are with photography now.
Well, that is another really incredible thing. You know, you can witness, not only witness those, but actually record those events now with literally with your iPhone.
Yeah.
that in itself.
mind-blowing.
In last week's episode, I spoke to Lisa Coney, who, is also very much into mobile photography and mobile editing, actually mobile post-processing.
Yeah, she's great with Lightroom Mobile.
Yeah, and so it really strikes me that I'd say over the last year and a half, maybe, it's really exploded.
Yeah,
like there's been a massive leap forward in technology with the iPhone 14 and the Galaxy. I don't actually know.
It's mind blowing. But when you look at so the iPhone photography conference is coming up. So I don't want to say too much about the things that I'm going to teach in the class because obviously I'm getting paid for that gig. But one of the things that I talk about heavily in that class is the fact that not only photography, but all photography is pushing towards being computational.
Yeah.
So to summarize what I mean by that, with the iPhone, when you take a photo, you don't need to do anything. You don't need to tweak any settings. You just open the camera app, the Apple camera app, and it automatically sets the white balance, balances the exposure, gives you a bracketed HDR kind of exposure in one, and everything's just kind of perfect. The focus point is perfect. Everything's perfect as soon as you open the app, and it's done. And so it's because of all the AI and all the trickery, the computational stuff within the camera.
And it's if you can compare that to the auto mode in your traditional camera, but the difference is that the AI built into your mobile phone now is actually intelligent.
Yeah.
It's like it can figure out most likely what the main subject of your shot is supposed to be, and therefore
identify what it is.
Yeah, identify what it is.
That's a dog, for example.
Yeah,
but also it's looking at every individual pixel and making each individual pixel perfect, rather than having the sensor perfect for what you say are the settings. It looks at each individual pixel and makes each pixel perfect so that your exposure is perfectly balanced. It's not clipped. The white balance is correct. The focus is correct. Everything's right. So it's computational. It's making the scene. It's not opening the shutter and taking the light in and recording what is there. It's assessing what is there, deciding what it should look like, and computationally putting it all together to make the photo that you think you're.
Well, and the argument.
See what I mean? Does that make sense?
Yes, and the argument has always been, traditionally, is like as far as the automatic mode on a camera was concerned, the argument has always been that as a photographer, you're the brains behind the operation, so you're making the creative decisions, and so the camera's just a dumb piece of metal basically that doesn't really know, and blah blah blah. But with computational photography now, it's gotten to the point where the computer inside of your phone makes an educated guess as to what your creative idea is, and it will basically make the image perfect for that. And because this assumption is not just a random assumption, but based on a whole,
it's based on machine learning.
Based on machine learning.
It's trained to recognize things.
It will, it makes a much better assumption than any other camera has ever been able to do.
But Samsung have got themselves in a bit of hot water this week.
Have they?
They advertised that the Galaxy S23 could zoom in and take a stunning photograph of the moon. What actually is happening is it's recognizing when you point it at the moon, recognizing that the round splodge is the moon, and then the AI is filling it in detail.
Right.
And do you know how they figured it, or how someone figured this out? Someone on Reddit saw this, figured that that's probably not right. Your sensor's tiny. It probably isn't exactly what's going on. So what they did is they took a stock photo of a full moon, shrank it to 170 by 170 pixels, blurred it in Photoshop, and then went across the room from their screen with the S23, took the photo,
right,
and they had a crisp, clear, perfect picture of the moon on their phone.
Right.
They didn't take a photo of the moon, and it wasn't crisp,
right,
but the photo is of the moon. So the AI is up to stuff. And I don't know about you, but I don't think that's a bad thing. It's not, how do we put this nicely? It's not accurate. It's not true traditional photography. But as long as you're aware that that's what's happening and have the ability to turn it off, then I don't think that's a bad thing. Samsung obviously tried to sneak it under the radar, though. They got caught. So what else is fake within your smartphone photography?
That's it. I mean, the thing is, I don't necessarily think it's a negative thing to have, to have technology help you create your vision.
Yeah.
Ultimately,
yeah. That's what we do with Photoshop. It's what we do in the Lightroom. It's what we did before in the darkroom.
Oh, absolutely, yeah, absolutely.
It's more about the consciousness, knowing that it is happening, having the ability to control it, tweak it, or turn it off.
Yeah,
that I think is the big deal.
We're just, we're at I think we're at the cusp of a new technology taking over with artificial intelligence, generally across the board, not only in photography, but, across the board when it comes to think of Chat GPT, and all the rest of it. So it's equally true with imagery as it is with copy or text, and all the rest of it.
We now have, what's it called? Version 5 of the AI photos. What's it called? You know the one. You know the text to image.
Oh yeah.
That thing that Kirsten's going to put right here on the screen.
Exactly.
We're on version 5 of that, and the problem that was identified before was that eyes was strange because it wasn't a white circle and a coloured circle and a black circle. It was like a random selection of circles in weird places. And hands, AI couldn't do hands. Oh, yeah. They were like 6 fingers, 4 fingers, 7 fingers, 2 thumbs. Weird stuff. But they've now completely fixed that.
Yeah.
With version 5. 5-fingered hands, perfect eyes. It's fixed. So in 8 months from version 4 to version 5?
Yeah.
Fix that problem, and we're steaming ahead.
Yeah, I mean the development is exponential. I mean we've talked about this in detail with Micah Burke, for example, when he was in the show a few months ago. I think beginning of December. I will put the link to the episode.
That's great.
And even then, I mean there's been a massive leap forward since then. But I remember speaking to her at the beginning of December and thinking like,
DALL-E.
We talked about DALL-E.
It's called DALL-E.
Well, so we talked about DALL-E originally in August last year.
Yeah.
And then between that and the beginning of December, again, that that DALL-E version was like an old hat, at that point. So it's incredible how exponential the development is of that technology. And ChatGPT is just another example for that. It's just incredible what you can do in absolutely no time with that piece of software. It's not necessarily perfect, and it just still means that you have to, fact check it and go through it. And
the images are downscaled; you have to upscale them. But we can upscale them using AI with
exactly.
Topaz, Gigapixel, with On1 Resize AI, with Luminar Skylum AI.
Yeah.
There are all these softwares out there that use AI to upscale images. So it's not just creating the image in the first place. It's not just using ChatGPT to write text. We can also then make the adjustments.
Yeah, absolutely. If you think about, in a professional sense, the usefulness of that, for example, let's say you have, let's say you create an image that, needs to be used for an advertising campaign. It needs to go on the side of a bus, for example, or the side of a building or whatever. Being able to upscale that image it's a huge advantage, to the point where you can actually use it in that form rather than having to reshoot or having to go through the whole process again. It's humongous. It also means that you don't necessarily always have to shoot with like 100 megapixel cameras, for example.
Shoot with your iPhone, 48 megapixels on the iPhone 14,
12
on the iPhone 13. Here's a sneaky thing. The 48 megapixels is actually 4 12 megapixel sensors stacked. What? They don't tell you that either.
No.
Anyway, that's not to say it's not real. Are we going to segue into a new topic? Because I really want to do something that I've not done before.
What's that?
We'll be back right after this word from our sponsors.
Let me just say a quick thank you to our sponsor, DVE Store. DVE Store's mission is to help you create better video and provide you with the tools necessary to explore your creativity. If you have any digital video equipment needs, whether that's camera equipment, audio gear, or lighting, and much more, you can check them out at dvestore.com. Thank you to DVE Store for the high-def video. And of course, you can find a link to DVE Store in the description.
I'll point out that they're not my sponsors. They're not our sponsors. They're Kirsten's sponsors. I'm sorry for that. Absolutely. We went off track as well. Let's talk about Vikings.
Oh, Vikings.
Because I've got some questions for you.
All right.
I'm going to flip everything upside down in this episode.
Cool.
So you've been a portrait photographer and a headshot photographer for quite some time. You've got a lot of experience. You're really good with lighting and you're really good with directing a subject.
Right.
What would you say is the biggest mistake people make directing a subject, and how can they overcome the biggest mistake that you identify?
Well, I mean,
because I see a lot of, like when I did weddings, I saw a lot of just turn this way, do this. And it was all just using a hand. And when people didn't understand it, there was no fallback.
Well, exactly. So, I mean, it's one of the things I always go through, every single time I shoot a session, especially with people who are not used to posing in front of the camera, like i.e., for instance, we do corporate headshots, something like that. People who are just not used to being in front of the camera.
Mm-hmm.
And the first thing you got to actually do is explain to them how your posing system works.
Right. Okay.
And you've got to give them reasons so they understand what they're doing. Right. So, for example, a good example is, headshots. The posing starts with the feet. This doesn't make any sense because we're not actually photographing the feet. But if we want to get our head in the right position, we need to actually get our body into the right position.
That makes sense.
And therefore, we need to start at the bottom, and we basically work from the feet up.
Right.
Okay. So that's the first thing. So, in saying that, I need to give the client or the subject a reason as to why I'm doing what I'm doing, or why I want them to do what I want them to do.
So once for me, I'd say, okay, because a lot. I'd just remind myself, just say because, and then it would help me to explain.
Yes, absolutely. Yeah. So that's the thing. So when you're talking to somebody who doesn't really have any experience in front of the camera, they need to really understand the causality of why, why they need to understand the why they're supposed to be doing what they're doing. Because what that does is throughout the session, it'll get them, because they're understanding why they're doing, why they're moving ahead in a certain way or whatever, why they're standing a certain way. Yeah. So if they understand why they're doing that, then they'll start doing it themselves. And actually what it means is over time, you have to give them less direction.
Okay.
And it actually makes the experience much more enjoyable because all of a sudden it feels like we're working together.
Yeah.
It's not just me clicking the shutter button, but it's the subject actually doing their thing. And so it becomes a thing that we're doing together rather than something that I'm doing to them.
Okay.
Does that make sense? That's one thing. And so, as far as, for instance, hand gestures is a good example. You mentioned that. I explain to people why I use certain hand gestures, and in explaining that, I mirror the action, and so mirroring is a really super important thing. It's important because from my background in education, I know that not all people learn in the same way. Some people need an explanation.
Right.
That's fine. Some people learn visually, for example. And
some people need to copy you.
Yeah, some people need to actually do the action. Kinetic learners, it's actually a huge thing. The majority of people are kinetic learners. So you need to get somebody, you need to basically show an example, get them to mirror everything that you do. And in getting the subject to perform the movements that you want them to perform, you need to do them yourself. And rather than overcomplicating things, mirroring something means that if I, imagine if I lift my right arm, they would be lifting the left arm because they're literally mirroring what I'm doing.
Yeah.
And that's, so I just, I have to think, as a photographer, I have to think the wrong way around. But there are ways around that as well. For instance, I won't use the words left and right because it's confusing.
Yeah,
because
some people don't know it anyway.
Well, exactly. And I confuse myself all the time, because I'm thinking, is it my right? So it's your left. So that's all of a sudden that's confusing. So, I'll talk about things like, your far shoulder or your camera foot, which is the foot closest to the camera, for example, so that way we know what we're talking about, regardless as to whether it's left or right, because depending on which way I'm standing, it might be my left shoulder or my right shoulder as close to the camera.
Okay.
And things like that. So it's relatively straightforward. But again, the key is to, and I always say this, the key is initially to build up trust, and that really starts before we even jump in front of the camera. That's the whole thing that happens before the shoot even starts. It's just building up of rapport and trust and all that. But then when we start shooting, it's about really being very clear on why why I need the subject to do certain things. And very often, it helps to just go a little bit into, what photography actually is and how we're kind of compressing the three-dimensional world into 2 dimensions and all the rest of it. And then they understand why I want them to, for instance, stretch their neck out into like a, like a turtleneck, for example. Exactly, because now I want the focus to be on the
Get rid of
head
all
the
of
face.
these.
Well, get rid of that, and also make the face the biggest thing in the frame and all that kind of stuff. So, I mean, all that.
But how would you deal with someone that doesn't want to play the game, like an angry barbaric Viking, for example?
Okay.
What if someone's really struggling and they're not cooperating? How do you win them round, or how do you make them understand?
Well, I mean, it's all about building up trust. That's the first thing. But the thing is, it's all about giving instructions in the language that your subject understands.
Mm-hmm.
For instance, take Vikings, for example. And I think I was thinking about Vikings quite a lot, obviously, because we're planning this workshop.
Mm.
And the thing for me is that in order to get somebody to pose in an interesting way, because that's exactly what we want to try and do. We want to try and create some really interesting dramatic imagery, yeah. And the stereotype when it comes to that sort of thing, we think, okay, Vikings, they are warriors, they have weapons, swords, shields, that sort of thing. So the instinct would be to put them into fighting poses. And there's nothing wrong with that. It looks awesome, no doubt. Cool, we can do that. But very quickly we arrive at a point where we're limiting ourselves with what we can get these models to do. Mind you, on the course we'll be working with professional models, so they know how to hold a sword. That's cool. But if you dive a little bit deeper and think about what Vikings actually were. They were warriors for sure, but they were also explorers.
Yeah.
For example, people who would sail across the Atlantic.
Yeah.
And they would discover things like
found Iceland,
Greenland, Iceland, North America.
Yep.
They're one of most likely the first Europeans to ever actually set foot.
And they found Canada, Finland.
Exactly. Yeah. So so they were explorers as well. So actually, now once you look at that from that perspective, then you can think of some poses that would basically personify exploration rather than violence and warfare. Does that make sense?
Yeah.
So immediately you're opening up lots of other aspects of how you can pose your Vikings and what kind of situation you can put them in. It's a really, they were also, I mean, to an extent, of course, you could take that a lot further. They were, when they were not on the warpath, they were farmers, most likely, that sort of thing. So, these are
and
hunters,
farming and fishing.
Exactly.
That was a big deal.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
So, and of course they also had family relations. So that you can bring all these sort of things in it. The other thing I think that's really important is to think creatively sometimes, and to use a principle called juxtaposition, where you create imagery whereby you have a subject, for instance, where the expectation is, well, that subject should be doing this, like a Viking should be swinging a sword, for example. Totally cool. But just imagine if you put that Viking in a situation that's completely un-Viking-ish.
Yeah.
Right? So, for instance, just imagine a shot where you have a Viking drive a car.
Yeah, okay.
Right? So you can create some really cool imagery about this, with this idea of
this Viking having an unusual adventure.
Yeah, a Viking checking out their mobile phone, for example.
Yeah.
Right? So you can create things that make people stop and think, rather than creating something that just goes along with the expectation that we would naturally have.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah.
You
don't want to go with the flow.
Yeah.
Because these aren't things that stand out.
Exactly.
The things that stand out are the things that are different, that break the mold.
Exactly.
And so if we can be the ones that create that, this is the Eiffel Tower effect, you know that?
Oh, absolutely, yeah.
The Eiffel Tower effect is the name I've coined for the sheer volume of identical photos. Mostly due to Instagram influencers going to places, making them famous and shooting the same thing in the same way. So the Eiffel Tower is the name because the Eiffel Tower is the most photographed thing in the world. Fact, Google it.
No.
And so it's hard to get a unique photo of the Eiffel Tower. So if you can break the Eiffel Tower effect, you can get a unique photo of a familiar thing.
Yeah.
So if we can get some unique photos of familiar landscapes in Lofoten using the Vikings.
Absolutely.
With the Reindeer, the landscapes themselves shot from different angles, different perspectives, different lenses, there's so many different techniques that we can use. We can overcome the Eiffel Tower effect.
The Eiffel Tower effect in posing, I think, is a really it's a really important aspect. And I'm not saying let's go out and photograph Vikings holding mobile phones or driving cars, but what I'm saying is let's think about what we could do differently
with the model that we have at our disposal right there. We're going to learn how to light our subjects in really interesting ways, not only in the classroom but also obviously on location. So we're going to learn how, if you're a natural light shooter, for example, fantastic. But if you've never shot with off-camera flash, on location,
control the light yourself.
Exactly, controlling, molding the light yourself, then you'll get the key to creating really powerful images on in this workshop. And so we're gonna talk about how to light our subjects on location with off-camera flash, for example. We're going to learn how to balance the natural light with our artificial light to create some images that are that look incredible. And
we're going to learn about the landscape and how to put them into the landscape.
And and then we're going to learn how to edit those images to really take them to the next level. So it's the shooting stage as well as the post-processing stage that we're going to dive into in detail. And we're going to use some of the most popular software packages around, Lightroom and Photoshop. Which in itself, I think the vast majority of people should have some experience with Lightroom at least, and or Photoshop. So we're going to look at Lightroom specifically, and then we're going to look at how we can combine Lightroom with Photoshop as well, to really unlock the power of those post-processing.
And I've not said this anywhere, this isn't in any marketing material or anything, but what I want to try and achieve for each workshop, each of the 6, there are only 6, it's very exclusive, is I want to get a photo of the Viking under the Northern Lights on each workshop. That's the goal. That's the goal. And that's a photo that you'll get if you come on the workshop that no one else has got. Nobody. So that's going to be cool. It's going to be a challenge, but if anyone can make it happen, it's me.
Oh, I'm pretty sure. I'm pretty sure it'll happen. It's it's super exciting. I think it's definitely the most exciting all-round concept for a workshop that I have ever come across. Because you'll see, you come across landscape photography workshops in areas like Lofoten or like Norway or or Iceland in particular. You come across, let's say, Northern Light photography courses. But to combine those two and to throw in
the Reindeer and the Vikings,
the
luxury meal at Boston, the Viking feast, the sauna.
Exactly. Oh, the sauna.
The sauna.
Yeah.
You can have a polar plunger and a sauna. But you say that it's all together. It's all different. It's the same but different. But what we've done, as well as be able to bring everything together and then add some extra stuff, the Reindeer, the Viking, the sauna, the restaurant, everything else, I've managed to negotiate such an amazing deal with all the suppliers that this is the same price as those workshops.
Yeah, it's absolutely incredible.
This is the same price point as the workshops without the Viking, that's pretty good.
Yeah, I don't know how you could possibly cram more stuff into a week. It's just,
I had to be careful not to overload it, but it's going to be incredible. We're going to have such a good time.
Yeah, it's going to be amazing fun. It's going to be an incredible learning opportunity. And just an experience of a lifetime.
And bookings are coming in. So if you are seriously thinking about it, get in touch, secure your booking. At the moment, we're working on a system to be able to take a deposit. But if you want to secure a spot, just send us an email and we'll get you on the list and secure you a spot while we figure out the deposit system.
It has to be said that they're very limited places. There are only 6 places.
8.
Oh, sorry, 8 places. There are only 8 places per workshop. So it's extremely limited. And where we are now, the middle of March, some of those are already filling up. So it's
I can't wait. It's going to be so cool.
It's going to be incredible. Fantastic. So if you want to learn more about these incredible workshops, I'm going to put the email address or the website address at the bottom of the screen. And of course, you can find all the details in the description of this podcast and the YouTube video. Of course, if you are listening or if you're watching on YouTube, in fact, you'll find all the details in the description. But
if people sign up to the Camera Shake mailing list, we're going to give you a secret 5% discount on the workshop through that email system. So sign up to that and you get a 5% discount code for the workshop.
And all you have to do is go to camerashakepodcast.com, click on join the community and sign up to the mailing list, and you'll be able to get a 5% discount on these incredible workshops.
Just because you're you and you're in this audience and you listened to all of that.
Fantastic. Amazing. So this was a quick one. We've come to the end of episode 147 of the Camera Shake podcast this week with some incredible news for you. Thank you so much for watching this video. If you enjoyed it, please hit that like button and subscribe to our channel for more great content. But before you go, let me share a quick insight from behavior science. When you engage with content you enjoy, you not only make the creator's day, but you also trigger a positive emotion in yourself. It's a small action that can make a big difference in how you feel. So by liking, commenting, or sharing this video, you're not only supporting us, but you're also benefiting yourself. It's a win-win situation. If you enjoyed this episode, let me recommend another episode that I think you'll love. Check out episode 97 with Dave Williams, back from his first expedition to the Arctic North, including Sweden, Norway, Finland, and Lapland. And if you have any suggestions or feedback, we'd love to hear it. Your comments are incredibly valuable to us and help us improve our content. So please don't hesitate to share your thoughts. Remember to hit the like button, ring the bell, and share with your friends. You can help us reach a greater audience all over the world. Once again, thank you for watching, and we'll see you next Thursday.